Thank you. I'll just make a couple of points and try to be brief. There's a lot of interesting stuff in this survey, and it seems the basic conclusion seems unassailable that immigrants cost, both legal and illegal and legal, cost a lot more in welfare costs or in the cost of these programs than native-born Americans. If you care about the costs, and we do, especially these days, you have to worry about who you let in. That said, from the welfare reform debate in '96, the problem, what people were so troubled about welfare was not the cost so much. It was that welfare seemed to enable a culture of, I don't know, however you want to call it, ghetto poverty, underclass culture, a culture of non-work and single-parent families that did not seem, the costs went well beyond the budgetary costs of the programs. And the startling thing about Steve's data, to me, is that the low use of the key welfare program that we were debating about in '96, which was then called AFDC, is now called TANF. The data seems pretty clear that immigrants, both legal and illegal, don't use the specific TANF program or AFDC as much as the native-born. They use a lot of other very expensive programs, but not that one. It's not, one question I had is why this is. There are three possible reasons suggested in here. One is in households headed by workers, they just might not qualify for welfare in some states because there'd be a requirement that if you work so much, you can't get it. If you're illegal, you might be scared to interact with the bureaucracy because you might be found out. I guess those would be the two main reasons, and it's not. I couldn't tell which was more important from the report. Also, you mixed in under the rubric cash welfare, TANF and SSI, as I understand it. And I had always thought SSI wasn't, at least the core of SSI wasn't really a welfare program at all because it's a work test. In other words, you only get it if you're unable to work. Now, I know there's a huge exception with the disability checks for children that's been allegedly abused, so-called crazy checks that may make SSI more like a welfare program. I would be very interested in how that breaks out. In other words, of the cash welfare here, how much is SSI, and how much of that is, the SSI that nobody argues with his checks going to 80-year-old, people who can't be expected to work, and how much is, the controversial disability part. But anyway, it's hard to see how, given this pattern of welfare use, you're going to get, with 95% of the families having somebody working in them, you're going to get the welfare culture that we worried about in the late 90s, in fact, this entire second half of the 20th century, and that we're still worrying about. It's really just an expense thing, and which is a perfectly legitimate reason to worry, but it's not as big a worry as the traditional worries about, quote, welfare, unquote. The second, my second point is welfare is on both sides. I made the horrible mistake of running for Senate in California in last year, and I had to articulate why I was basically running on an anti-comprehensive immigration reform platform, and when you articulate why I'm concerned with unconstrained immigration, it's not the welfare expense so much as it is driving down wages for the working poor and changing our national culture for the worse. And I did find that there is a sort of borderless mentality in the people who were arguing against me. People did not understand. They said, "I'm in this country. Why don't you want to give me full dignity? Are you a racist?" That's basically at the level at which the argument takes place in California. And if you do believe that the border doesn't make sense and you sort of don't recognize the legitimacy of the border, it also makes sense that there would be no reason why people would want to keep you out of the country. You must be a racist. So there's that mentality that one is also worried about what effect that mentality will have if it takes hold. But because immigration drives down the wages for the working poor, it increases welfare use among the native-born, as well as the use among the immigrant population, which because it's unskilled tends to have a lot of working poor people in it. So in a sense, immigration drives both sides of your ledger. It drives, there would be fewer welfare cases among the native born if there were lower immigration. I just wanted to make that point. And the final point is, I guess it's very important that you made the point about the moral, that it not being a moral defect, because that is, if you make that argument, it feeds into the borderless anti-racist mentality that I talked about. They say, what, you're saying we're bad people? Are you, and I tried, not to much success, to argue that no, California lives off the labor of immigrants, legal and illegal. It's just, at some point, there has to be an end to the process if we're also going to protect the wages of our native-born people. And the way the immigration advocates outline it, I see no end in sight. You know, what happens to the next wave of immigration and the next wave? It's very important that we not fall into the trap of saying these are bad people we're letting in, and that's why we don't want to let them in. But if we do care about expense, you've clearly documented that the expense is huge.